If you're not perfectly aligned, if you're a millimetre out at the start, if you haven't done your thinking, then you're going to be flipping miles off when you get to execution, and your execution will not be pulling things in the right direction.
Funnel Visionaries. Hello again and welcome to another episode of Funnel Visionaries, where we talk a whole lot of realness about perfecting the customer journey. I'm your host, Konrad Sanders, and today I'm joined by the incredibly charming Gareth Turner, who is the founder of Big Black Door and former head of marketing at Weetabix. And in today's episode, we complain about those annoying marketing hustle bros on LinkedIn. But more importantly, we dive into the importance of measuring twice and cutting once when it comes to marketing and strategy. Let's dive in. Gareth, welcome to Funnel Visionaries.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's all good.
How are you doing on this fine day? Is there actually a bit of sun out there, believe it or not?
Well, you say fine where you are, but as of recording, I'm in Leeds, and we've had probably 2 feet of snow over the last week. So we're not quite snowbound. I'm going to say we're icebound. It's treacherous out there.
Is it like sludgy?
No. I'm going to say like an ice rink, like Streatham ice rink. Actual ice, sheet ice everywhere.
That sounds kind of cool. I always think if it's going to be this cold, it may as well snow, and you want that snow to settle, which it rarely does in London, probably because of all the fumes.
Yeah,
just ruining it on the way down.
Yeah, it was nice at the weekend. It was almost like being on a ski holiday. There's all the kids out sledging. It was magical. But now it's just like grey sludgy ice.
There you go. Just for those listening, because probably this will anyone listening that's getting confused and wondering why it's snowing in spring or whenever we actually release this episode, it's January for us, for Gareth and I, right here, right now.
For continuity reasons, it's January for.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, I interviewed you last year on a panel talk, and you were equal parts wise and entertaining. So I'm very much looking forward to this episode. I just thought I should say that.
I've been called many things. I'm not sure wise and entertaining.
Wise and entertaining combined. So we're going to obviously dive into some real serious marketing chat and dispel some myths. And I really want to talk about the kind of relationship or lack thereof between strategy and tactics. But before I do, I want to start with a bit of marketing silliness, if you will. We like to call this segment, What Spams Your Sanity? So I'd like to ask you, Gareth, what spams your sanity when it comes to marketing at the moment? What's your biggest marketing pet peeve?
I mean, where do I start? I guess the thing that really grinds my gears are these, I don't know what they call it, the current term is like marketing bros on LinkedIn. They got this sort of one size fits all solution. Yeah. What you need to do is this. What you need to do, you need to be on TikTok. You need to do this one thing. And it's just shit advice. It's just shit advice. And so there's no substitute. Yeah, spoiler alert. We're going to probably come back to this, right? There's no substitute for robust thinking, spending your time doing a thinking. There is no one size fits all in terms of execution, in terms of tactics. So I really grates me. I can see the appeal of it.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know what you're doing, and even when you do know what you're doing, it's appealing, right? Of course, everyone wants a fast win. And when I'm looking, we were just chatting offline about sort of filling pipelines and things. When I'm looking to fill my pipeline of business to come into my business, then those quick wins, those get rich quick schemes, they have an appeal. And so I can see, I find myself going, oh, what's marketing bro saying about this thing? Oh, let me have a look at that thing. And next thing you know, I've lost half a day messing around with some sort of tool that he's publicizing. And there's no substitute for hard work, marketing fundamentals and thinking. And so, I find the harder I work at generating new business, the better I am at it, not just trying to get some sort of get rich quick, easy solution with minimal effort. That's not how the world works.
I completely agree with you, of course.
It's lucky.
That's why I'm having these conversations with seasoned marketers who know their stuff and talking about all of the many, many nuances and sophisticated marketing funnel building, things like that, which we'll dive into. But I'll also say, I also find myself occasionally being attracted by what these hustle bros are kind of spitting onto LinkedIn for the same reason, because
Yeah.
it's almost like a tension between my logical, rational brain and then the primal brain of simplicity, quick win, silver bullet, and often there's some controversy in there, and that's actually why I think why the algorithm probably serves us up so much of that
Yeah.
shit, basically, because it's, that's the kind of thing your brain's going to stop on the primal part and go, oh wow, oh, that's strong, that's simple, that's
Yeah.
easy, like it. And sadly there's too much of that, as you said,
Yeah.
too much
But
of it out there.
humans are lazy, though, right? We're by nature lazy, and so
Yeah.
when someone is giving you this shortcut, this hack to make loads of money, then of course it's appealing. Because who doesn't want to be sitting on a beach somewhere rather than working?
Working
It
hard.
has an appeal.
Yeah. I've actually got a half-baked LinkedIn post which begins with stupid content outperforms clever content on LinkedIn. Naturally, I then go to explain what I mean about that, and it outperforms it in terms of vanity metrics, but it's
Yeah,
likely not what you really want to be communicating to your target audience,
yeah.
unless
It's
you are
not.
targeting kind of the average Joe and you're just really looking for kind of likes and vanity. And
Okay. And again, another spoiler alert. We may come back to this because that's off-brand. So
yeah,
it's relatively easy. And I say that with a massive caveat. It's relatively easy to do stuff that's controversial. That's going to get some engagement, whether you're a brand or an individual. But is that thing that you're doing driving your business and your brand or your persona, whatever it is, in the right direction? And if it's not, you shouldn't be doing it. Trick is to find engaging stuff that's driving your brand forward rather than engaging stuff full stop.
yeah, absolutely. And I guess I'm trying to draw a segue here. I guess that some of these things that we talked about that, hustle bros, marketing bros do would be classed as tactics. Do this one thing, this one little tactic that's going to work for you. As we know, and as we've discussed, there is no silver bullet.
Yeah.
So what should come before tactics?
Well, so I subscribe to this. So it's not. This isn't my thinking here. There's plenty of thinking, and Mark Ritson talks about this brilliantly. So if anyone doesn't know Mark Ritson, you've got to be following Ritson because he's a god level marketeer. But he talks about deep diving, understanding your audience, understanding the market. You develop a strategy, and then you execute. So we have a understand, strategy, execute process that we go through with all our clients. So what goes before execute is understand and strategy. So
Yeah.
proper thinking. That's what goes before it.
Yeah, and I've heard you say to me before, it's not your metaphor, but measure twice, cut once. And you've applied this to the world of marketing, which is quite clever, and I think it's very relevant to the discussion we're having having right now. Well, explain. What do you mean? What do you mean by this?
It's about getting your thinking straight because nobody wants to be wasting time and money unless you know what you need to do, unless you know what your objectives are, unless you spend the time to do things properly, to know where you're headed, then how do you know what to do and if what you're doing is any good? Now, you've already cottoned on to the fact I love a metaphor and a story here, Konrad. So I'll give you another story.
Please.
Back in the early 2000s, in my first flat, I laid a laminate floor. And that was in the day before it was all easy and clicky-inny. Right, nowadays they all sort of lock together. But back then, this floor from IKEA they had like sort of tongue and groove thing. You had to get it all lined up perfectly. So I cleared the room and I took all the carpet up. I did all the stuff, doing it myself. First row went in, boom. Second row went in, and there was maybe a millimetre gap down in that corner. It'll be all right, I said. Don't you worry, Gaz. That's going to be okay. No one will notice that. But then by the time we got over the other corner, it was nothing short of a chasm, this 1 millimetre gap. It had got worse and worse and worse. And if that teaches you anything, obviously it teaches you about marketing strategy, right? So if you're not perfectly aligned, if you're a millimetre out at the start, if you haven't done your thinking, then you're going to be flipping miles off when you get to execution. And your execution will not be pulling things in the right direction. So we need to get everything tight as a drum up front. Know exactly what we're doing, exactly what we're talking about, who we're talking to, how we're going to do it, the category entry points, all this stuff, and get that tight before we get the colour and pencils out.
Why do you think marketers, so many of them, jump straight into the cutting? Is that because of pressures? And I've probably got my own thoughts about this, but do you think it's because of pressures from the powers that be within those companies that they're working, often stakeholders that don't really get marketing. They're looking for execution because that's the measurable part. That's the actual bit that
Yeah.
will get the results, and they want to see it quickly because they're impatient.
Yeah. I think
Or is
there's
there a wider problem with the industry as a whole?
I think there are a few things there. I think there is a pressure to deliver. I think there's a naivety. In my career, I started in sales and then I moved across to marketing. So I was a sales director at Heineken, then moved across into marketing at Heineken. And when if someone had asked me in a sales director, how long does it take to make a TV advert? I'd have gone, maybe 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks. It's a good 13, 14 week process if you're lucky, if everything goes your way. And so there's no surprise that, don't judge me here, Konrad, but I love The Apprentice. But in the Apprentice episodes where they're making TV adverts, no surprise, they're shit. They're shit because they've been asked to do that in 24 hours. They don't understand their audience. They don't understand anything about the product they're putting. And so it's shit. Quite aside from the production values, the idea behind it is also shit. So there's good stuff takes time to do. So there's a pressure to deliver. There's a naivety that you can bang out in that example, a TV ad or any other sort of execution. There's a human bias towards action and visible actions. It's very easy to see a TV ad, a pack design, a shelf marker, a piece of copy, whatever it is. It's harder to see thinking. So that's why it's hard to sell. That's what I do. So when I'm talking to clients or potential clients about that, we talk about there are many check-ins when we do our process to make sure that people are constantly seeing something. They're constantly getting a thing that they might be able to use tomorrow, that there's no big ta-da moment.
So within the strategy process itself, making sure there's things they can touch and feel and look at and
Yes.
understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that I also think that there are several, I don't know, agencies out there who are selling marketing strategy, but really what they're selling is a precursor to them selling you their tactics. So therefore there's a bias for them to push you towards their execution, their tactics. So for example, if I pitched recently to a business and I was a third person to pitch, I said, look, what you're going to see from me, I think is going to be different from what you've seen from other people, because what I will show you is how we're going to get to a strategy, and then we'll decide how we execute that strategy, because until we have that, we don't know what we're going to do. And I said, if you're a social media agency selling strategy, guess what the solution is going to be? Right? It ain't going to be a PR plan. It ain't going to be new pack design. It's going to be a social media strategy. And they all laughed and went, oh yeah, we've had 2 of those already. No surprise. They're not agnostic. They've got there's a hidden agenda. There's an absolutely unhidden. There's an obvious agenda
overt.
there. There's overt. Thank you. That's why you're the wordsmith, Konrad. There's an overt agenda there that the thing they're doing is pushing you towards the thing they're selling. And I don't sell any of that stuff. I just sell, I hope, relatively robust thinking. So again, there's an overt agenda there for me, let's be honest. But until we know what the strategy is, we don't know what the right execution should be. And so I think you see me get quite energized there.
Yeah. As you should. We want that passion here on this. No, you know what? It's really interesting because just to kind of relate it back to what we do as an agency, and again, I'm glad that there's sort of some similarities in how we see things and approach things. We, in a nutshell, do research, strategy, and words, right? But I often say to clients that if we're tackling your content strategy, that's a standalone piece of work. Our goal is not to upsell what we then do, because the reality is we're there to build a strategy that's going to work for you within your budget, help you achieve your goals. And it might be that we come into that and we understand that there's a gap there when it comes to like video content, which is an extremely engaging form of content, right? And that actually everyone else in the industry is just writing these blog posts, is saturated. You could pierce through and that would be a better use of your budget. Or maybe you really just need to PPC traffic, send it to a landing page, and so on and so forth. And so I tried to communicate that because it's accurate, it's true. When we go into those strategic workshops and follow our logical steps, we're not just there, as I guess other similar agencies agencies to us might just be, let's build a content calendar.
Yeah.
Well, it's not. It's a content strategy for us is really like more of a digital marketing strategy, because you can't think of content alone. Otherwise, you're falling into the trap of focusing on tactics, focusing on execution, and just, creating a little bit of a plan around how to execute, which is not, in my opinion, a proper strategy.
Yeah. Totally agree.
What I was going to ask is, I was going to add one more point to the last question about why do marketers jump straight into execution? And we've said the kind of internal pressures from others. Do you think it's also because execution is more fun, more exciting, sexier? So marketers themselves, who I would say often marketers come in different shapes and sizes, but I think often their brain's more on the kind of creative side of things. And so maybe that's just what they enjoy. Let's design something, let's come up with a campaign idea. They're not as sort of naturally prone to doing that more robust, deep thinking and planning. And
I think it depends. I hear you. I see that, right? And an example would be that when I moved from sales into marketing at Heineken, I mean, I had some credibility perhaps back then, and they gave me a chance. But the truth is, I knew nothing about marketing. I thought it was all about making TV ads and different pack designs. But the data that was analysed, the thinking, I just had no idea, absolutely no idea what I was letting myself in for. I think that was a massive thing. A sheet of snow, I think, just falling off my off the ceiling there, made me jump, or some sort of yeti attacking us. I don't know. So I had no idea about the data that was analysed and required. See, I see that, but I also see when I've been interviewing for people, so at Weetabix, for example, when I have been interviewing for brand manager positions, I mean, you want someone who's a doer, but you want someone who's also can analyze and think about stuff and is able to develop a strategy. But I'm going to say that there are probably more than two camps. I guess there are two camps of people here. One is at their extreme, you've got the thinker who doesn't do, and you've got the doer who doesn't think. And what you want is really a bit of both. You want someone in the middle there who is able to flip into action and also into analysis.
I think especially for smaller companies, like our agency being one of them, we've got a marketing director and then some marketing support. But I think absolutely when you're sort of a lone wolf, you have to do so much. Marketing's such a beast, right? There's so much to it that you kind of need to have both sides of the brain, and you need to be a planner, a thinker, and a doer. Because I guess one without the other. And this coming back to the metaphor, measure twice, cut once. Have you found that sometimes have you seen the opposite problem occur? Measure 10 times, cut once, and that also not really leading to results?
Great point. Yeah, yes, absolutely. It's very easy to get stuck in that analysis. Sort of, they call it analysis paralysis, right? And you get in there and just constantly looking for the perfect solution. And the truth is, there's never any perfect solution. What I enjoyed in sales was that they say, Gareth, you go and sell loads of Fosters. And I go, yes, I can sell lots of Fosters. I go and sell a lot of Fosters, and I sell more Fosters than you sell, Konrad, which makes me better than you. And it's absolutely bang, comparable and obvious, right? And it's black and white, but there is no black and white in what we do. When you put two pack designs into research, you very, very rarely get very clear response. You very clear direction. So you have to sort of interpret and read between the lines a bit and deal with ambiguity. And if that's a skill in learning how to deal with ambiguity, if you can't do that, and I have certainly found that hard in my career. If you can't do that, you just get bogged down in looking for I'll do some more research to find the answer to that. And that's not, you just got to make a decision and go with it. And there's very few things that you do that you can't over time reverse yourself back out of. But making a decision and standing for something is always preferable to just sort of being beige and bland and just sitting back and just getting bogged down in waiting for the perfect solution.
Yeah, I definitely have found myself in the past falling into the trap of analysis paralysis. And I think there was this time, this is when we were pushing our academy, our digital product. It was kind of a learning experience for me to sort of understand that really data is only as good as what you do with it, right? Otherwise it's not useful in any way, right? It's only useful if you draw some insights and conclusions. And as you grow as a marketer, you understand that there isn't perfect data, right? You have to draw conclusions, and that they're what are important, the conclusions, because data can be read in different ways. And also agencies have certain agendas. So different agencies will be trying to present data to kind of favor, what they're doing and try to show results that might really not be there at all. I want to touch on sort of data/insights, because you mentioned this three-part approach, right? I guess it's insights, not too dissimilar to kind of how we do things as well, of the research, strategy and word. But you mentioned essentially this three-part approach, so data, strategy and execution. Let's start with the first part. So how would you go about gathering insights? Like if you were working with a company or within a company as a marketing director, what kind of questions should we be asking? What data should we be gathering?
Well, I mean, there's loads, right? There's loads that you can do, and we have a checklist. Well, that's a wish list rather than a checklist, because I don't expect everyone to have everything. We have a checklist, a wish list that we send to people. So we set up a data room and say, let's get all this stuff, stick it in a data room, and we're going to read it. And that's our understand phase. And the things that are in there that will give you half a chance of success. The first thing is a deep understanding of your target audience. Who is it you're trying to communicate with? Who's going to be buying your product? What are their mindsets, the needs they have? And that's not about demographics. That's attitudes and needs. And there's a very famous example, Konrad, where you describe this person in demographics. He's a male, he's very famous, born in 1948 or something. He's been married a couple of times, got some kids, likes big chairs, goes skiing, very wealthy. And that equally describes King Charles and Ozzy Osbourne. And those two characters demographically are very similar. But I'm going to suggest, unless there's a hidden depth to King Charles, I'm going to suggest that attitudinally they might be quite different. So the demographics will be unhelpful for us there. So a deep understanding of the attitudes of your target audience, and then what they're looking for from your category. So an understanding of your category. What are the things that trigger purchase? What are the things that make a shopper more likely to buy your product than someone else's product, or a product in that category? So for food, it's often related to taste and enjoyment of the food. For lager, back in the day, it was about refreshment. Cider was refreshment as well. So when you understand these things, you understand your target audience, some of their attitudes, some of the things you might need to say to them, some of the places you might need to put your product, some of the products you might need to develop. So you need to understand how your product matches up against these category entry points and these purchase drivers. Once you understand all that stuff, then you can, and that's the understand phase, only then can you start to say, well, if we want to hit X objective, and that's part of the understanding phase, is the business objectives. If we want to go from here to here, and we know this about our audience, and the strategy will be saying something like, okay, for these people, the brand needs to take this positioning. We need to talk about these sort of things with those sort of people and make our brand easy to think of, salient, come to mind easily, and easy to buy. So that will be about mental availability, physical availability, all the 4 Ps, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And that's when you move from the deep business immersion understanding to strategy. And then when you've developed that work, you're writing briefs to say, if your awareness is poor, you know where you stand on awareness, you're creating briefs to drive awareness. If your product doesn't meet up to the category expectations, then you're developing a product brief for someone to develop NPD or other things. So that's only when you know the category, your audience, and then how you're going to win, should you be moving to tactics and execution.
And you mentioned a few food and drink brand names. I know that's your background. Have you worked outside of that world? And if so, I'm just quite interested to know, like, what differences do you see, let's say, in that journey of data insights, strategy and execution? I believe, because we're sector agnostic, that the core of the journey stands true for all industries. That's
Yeah.
the logical order of things.
Yes.
But are there nuances between industries that you've noticed,
I
let's say
think,
coming out of food and drink?
yes, yeah, you're absolutely right. My background is food and drink, and the majority of the brands I work with are food and drink brands. But I'm working with a B2B shipping business, freight business. I'm working with a very large shopping centre somewhere in the UK. I've worked with a charity. So the process holds true. That's a marketing fundamental. Understand your target audience, understand the category you're operating in, understand the drivers and motivators in that category, and work out how you're going to grow once you've understood that. That's whether I'm talking about a shipping container or a box of cereal. That's true. Where you start to diverge then is at execution. So I might choose a different media plan if I'm talking to shoppers about a cereal brand or business owners about where to buy their shipping containers. Right, that I might do a different approach to trade shows, but that all still is about understanding the target audience. It's just different executions there, and I've got a relatively standard slide in my deck which talks about sort of the difference between B2C, and actually I think it's just B2H, which is business to human. Whether you're buying shipping containers or buying a box of cereal, you're still a human being, and you still have human motivators and desires, but your process internally you might need to marry up a bit more functional and emotional motivations, because whilst I might buy into something emotionally, I need some stuff to take to the board to sell in, for example. So give me some sort of proof points as to why that's the right decision. So, but that all stems back to it's a deep understanding of the target audience and how they're making decisions and how they're doing stuff.
Yeah, and that's interesting because you almost kind of bit of a full circle there, looping back to what I call the sort of primal brain and then the rational brain.
Yeah.
And arguably in the B2C world, if you're buying, I mean, I wouldn't say it's necessarily B2B, B2C thing. I think it's like a high consideration decision and a not so high consideration decision. You know, if I'm buying a pair of jeans or a juice or something, I'm not going to take as long. That sales cycle is not as long. I'm not going to have to. It's probably more emotionally driven, right? It's more kind of primal brain instincts, emotions, but understanding those drives, understanding that that's how I'm going to make that kind of brand choice. As you said, within the insight phase, means that you can create the right strategy and execute in the right way. Whereas if it is B2B and you know that buyer's journey, they need to take it back to the board. They're probably going to spend a few months even going back and forth. It's not just going to be emotionally charged decision. There's going to be logic. There's going to be a checklist that they'll have to tick off. But again, going back to the fundamental process there, if you understand those are their needs, their drivers, their barriers and things, then you can execute in the right way.
Yes, absolutely.
Can I ask a question that's just popped into my mind, as things often do? Marketers that are right now in a situation, whether they're an agency or let's say maybe more so in-house within a company, and they're executing right now, they're listening to this and they're going, oh gosh, I've jumped straight through to execution. It's just been tactics. What do you think is like, what do you have some sort of advice about how to almost like logistically go back a step or you know, because we often find that as an agency is there's a logical order to do things, but then there's often the reality of there being internal politics, stakeholders, as we said, pressuring them to do things. They're probably halfway through a campaign. What advice would you give, or even as an agency coming into that situation, how would you get them to pause and say, let's take a step back, or let's continue what you're doing there? And how can you retrofit strategy into that sort of scenario?
Well, I think the easiest way is to call me and I'll do it for you. The second easiest way is to recognise that. I mean, we never stop someone doing business as usual. You've got to keep stuff going, right? So that's working to a degree for you. To do something is probably better than doing nothing. And no one's deliberately going out and saying my product is terrible, never buy my product, right? So everyone's doing something to try and, with best intention, to try and drive their brand growth. So you don't stop the business as usual. You try and do stuff in parallel, and you just crash things together where you can. So I've talked, I think, earlier on, I've lost track of what I said today, but I think I spoke about like no to DARs and this idea that we have an iterative process. We'd have a workshop to do this thing. We debrief that thing. And then actually when there is business as usual, we say, okay, look, actually we've learned these couple of things here in this. Why don't you could do that tomorrow, right? You could start to change your tone of voice tomorrow. You could start to talk a bit about the benefits rather than the features you've got. You could start to, whatever it is, but there'll be a couple of little nuggets that you can get some quick wins with and some quick changes that are easy to make. And hopefully they're successful. Hopefully that social media post that you say, speak about people, not factories. Hopefully that starts to get a bit more traction and people go, okay, hang on, these sort of things are helping us to go in the right direction. And then you iterate and you crash together, you iterate and you crash together. And then there'll be a moment in larger businesses, there's a moment, a brand planning process where you can crash that in properly at that point. You say, okay, right, now we're going to do things. The 2026 brand planning process starts in March 25, but now we've got all this new learning, the new strategy, we've got the new thinking here. Now we want to build that into our new campaign, if that's how you're operating. You can't stop everything because we've all got a business to run as well.
Yeah, and actually we talked off camera about the fact that us as agency people, we have to drive revenue every single month.
Yeah.
Like the reality is you have to feed the beast. It's important. And I think what you sort of touched on there is really, really important. And it's basically like, look at the low hanging fruit as well, right? And it also kind of, in my opinion, it kind of loops back to the whole don't measure 10 times, cut once. And I've seen agencies where it's like they'll come in and we're going to take 6 to 9 months to do this big strategy, and then the output the company's not happy with, and in the meantime they needed to do marketing, right? They had to keep bringing in leads, converting them, driving revenue. So if you can identify sort of low-hanging fruit first, start patching the holes of coming back to the funnel, because this is Funnel Visionaries. Patch some of those holes, the easy ones, while at the same time, I guess, simultaneously have discussions around how to start building some proper strategy, like another bigger, stronger funnel, perhaps.
But this isn't about going all in on something, so waiting for something and then just putting all your chips on black. It's about test, learn, scale as well. So in that made up example I gave there, we need to talk about people in our social media posts rather than factories. So what might an experiment be on that? Okay, well, hypothesis is we believe that will do better than that. Okay, let's give that a go for 3 weeks and then we'll measure it. And our KPI is engagement or reach or followers or whatever your measure is. Okay, right, that's worked. We'll go all in on that now. Then you go all in. But you don't just suddenly change everything and go all in on everything on day one. That would be reckless. So it's a slowly, not wasting money. That's the test and learn is part of the measure twice. And then you scale, then you cut.
Yeah. Can I ask one final question? Again, jumped into my head right now. It's about your agency, Big Black Door. Where's the name come from?
So there are the true story, and then there's the retrofitted story. The true story is that I once ate at a restaurant in Newcastle called the Black Door Brasserie, and I just like the name. So it stuck with me. That I think that business has gone out of business. Hopefully it's not an omen, but they're out of business now, I think. Black Door was taken, so I went with the Big Black Door as the name of the business. I then Googled Big Black Door and tried to sort of think, well, what's the story there? And you can Google it yourselves. There is a story about some sort of Persian general who used to offer prisoners of war. It's quite a grim story, actually. Offer prisoners of war a choice of facing the firing squad or going through this big black door that was in the wall behind them. Generally speaking, people chose. I think it's a fable. Generally speaking, they chose the firing squad because it was certain. There was certainty there, and they didn't know whether it was like lions and tigers or whatever behind this door. And the truth was, it's freedom behind the door. And so I quite like that story. I'm not quite sure what the moral of it is in relation to marketing strategy, but it's about making choices. It's about perhaps behind the door there is light and freedom, perhaps behind when you start working with me. I don't know, but they're the true story. I just like the name from the restaurant.
call to action at the end, which was good. Come and open the big black door and see
Yeah.
what's behind it. Gareth will be there. And
It's quite a handy device for things like, my catch-all email address is like knock knock at big black door, or ring ring, or come and bang on the door, come and open the door, or all these sort of things. It's a lot of the processes that we've developed have got some sort of door related acronym. So it's been fruitful.
Yeah, it lends itself to branding harder, as I like to say. It's good differentiation there. There was this company that it was web hosting that we used to use called A Small Orange, and brilliant from a branding perspective. I used to use it in presentations to show how far you can go away from the boring classic B2B. And they were like homegrown hosting and all these kinds of things. Anyway, we're so much more to talk about. We should do this again sometime.
Part 2.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about AI. But you know what? It's refreshing not to talk about AI. And I think it's important to also not just talk about AI and to talk about the fundamentals of marketing. Because whether you're using AI or not, you need to follow the fundamental process of marketing that gets results and not get extracted by all these shiny objects everywhere. And I guess that's the sort of conclusion, if you agree.
Yeah, totally. And AI and the other shiny objects are great, but they're tactics. They're not strategies. So they may well be useful. They may well be the solution, but let's know what the question is first.
There we go. Thank you so much, Gaff. I love this. I love this chat.
Good. Anytime.
And for everyone listening, remember, measure twice, cut once.
Indeed.
And if you need help with that, you can go find Gareth, and we will be dropping all his information into the show notes.
Thank you.
So thanks again. Have a lovely, snowy, sludgy afternoon, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you.